endlessly across the horizon, a golden ocean shimmering under the ruthless sun. For 6 long days, Dr. Amelia Ward and her team had battled scorching winds, broken equipment, and exhaustion as they searched for a lost burial site spoken of only in ancient myths. Now, at last, they had found it. A massive stone door, half buried beneath centuries of drifting sand, rose out of the dune like the spine of a forgotten beast. Strange hieroglyphs covered its surface, not the graceful symbols of familiar pharaohs, but jagged, violent carvings unlike anything seen in modern Egyptology. Dr. Omar Khalid, Amelia's partner and expert in ancient languages, stood beside her in awe. This is older than the Old Kingdom, older than known civilization. And these symbols, he touched them gently, they warn intruders to stay away. Amelia wiped sweat from her brow. Warnings are made to be interpreted, she said with a small smile, but her voice wasn't steady. She felt something cold in her stomach, something she couldn't explain. From behind them, Jacob Hale, an American documentarian filming the expedition, zoomed in on the mysterious carvings with his high-end camera. "The world is going to love this," he said. "A tomb no one's ever seen before. Dr. Ward, is this really a new pharaoh?" Omar shook his head. "No pharaoh, something else." His voice dropped. "The villagers warn us this place belongs to Neferhotep, the forgotten ruler, the cursed one, a man so evil that the priests erased him from all history and sealed him in a tomb not meant to be opened." Jacob lowered his camera slightly. "Is that true? They really erased him?" Amelia nodded slowly. "Entire civilizations have been erased before. A single ruler? Quite possible." But she didn't say what she was really thinking, that the name Neferhotep made her bones feel heavy, as if it carried 1,000 buried screams. The team set up camp as the sun dipped below the dunes. The desert cooled rapidly. Shadows grew long and sharp. A strange silence covered the site. That night, Amelia sat alone by a lantern, examining rubbings she'd taken of the glyphs. Her fingers trembled slightly as she traced one particular line. "Who disturbs the sleep of the unbound shall become its flesh." She swallowed. Just mythology, she told herself. Jacob approached from behind, his boots crunching gently on the sand. "You all right?" he asked. "Yes," she lied. Jacob looked at the inscriptions. "What do you think it means?" Amelia sighed. "It means we're dealing with something ancient enough to inspire superstition. The older the burial, the more dramatic the warnings." Jacob frowned. "But you're shaking." Before she could respond, the ground trembled. Just once, a soft vibration, enough to rattle the lantern and knock over a cup. Amelia stiffened. Jacob whispered, "Did you feel that?" Another tremor. Stronger. Shouts erupted from the workers' tents. People stumbled outside, confused and frightened. "What's happening?" someone cried. "An earthquake?" Another yelled. But Amelia knew better. Earthquakes don't come with whispers. A cold wind sliced across the camp. It carried a sound, faint, broken and low, like a voice trapped beneath miles of sand. Amelia's breath caught in her throat. Jacob whispered, "No, that can't be a voice." But it was. The wind whispered again, "Release me." The temperature dropped sharply. Frost formed on the metal crates. Jacob's camera fogged over instantly. Dr. Omar rushed toward them, panic on his face. "It's coming from the tomb." The stone door, untouched for millennia, began to shift. Grinding stone echoed across the desert as grains of sand spilled from the cracks. The door moved slowly, shuddering, as though something behind it was pushing outward. Workers screamed and ran toward the trucks. "Do not leave the site," Omar shouted, but no one listened. Amelia stepped closer, her heart pounding. This isn't possible." Jacob filmed with shaking hands, his breath fogged in the freezing air. The door opened another inch. A hand, grey, decayed, wrapped in ancient bandages, slipped through the crack. Amelia stumbled back. Jacob dropped his camera. The fingers twitched. Then an eye appeared in the gap, completely black, reflecting no light at all, like looking into a window of endless night. Jacob whispered, "Oh my God." The thing inside the tomb slammed its hand against the door, trying to push it open further. A deep, animalistic growl echoed out. Omar rushed to the door. "Help me close it," he yelled. Amelia and Jacob ran forward. Together they pressed their shoulders against the stone slab. The creature inside thrashed violently, pushing back. For a moment, Amelia felt its strength, unnatural, impossible. Then something whispered directly into her ear, though no one stood beside her. "Amelia," she gasped and almost let go. "How does it know my name?" she cried. Omar shouted, "Don't listen! Push!" With a final heave, they forced the door shut. The stone sealed with a thunderous boom. Silence. No tremors, no whispers, no cold wind. Just three people shaking uncontrollably, staring at a door that never should have opened. Jacob fell to the sand, breathing hard. That wasn't a curse. That wasn't a legend. There's something alive in there. Amelia stared at her trembling hands. Not alive, something worse. Omar nodded slowly. We must... The morning sun rose weakly over the dunes, but its warmth couldn't reach the camp. The air felt colder than the night before. Too cold for the desert. Too still, too silent. Only a handful of workers remained. Most had fled during the night, leaving behind tools, clothes, and even personal belongings. As if staying a second longer near the tomb would steal their lives. Dr. Amelia Ward stood beside the stone door, staring at the place where the decayed hand had emerged. She wasn't afraid of ancient curses, but she was terrified of things she couldn't explain. Jacob Hale adjusted his camera nervously, filming everything even though his hands trembled. I reviewed the footage, he said. Every frame of the mummy's hand is corrupted, glitched. It's like... The camera refused to capture it. Dr. Omar Khalid was pale. Good. The less evidence people have, the better. If anyone sees what we saw, they will try to open that tomb again, and that must never happen. Amelia glanced at the desert horizon. We seal the entrance today, permanently. But sealing the tomb wouldn't be easy, because something inside had already awakened. A worker goes missing. Around noon, one of the remaining workers, Youssef, was digging near the base of the stone door to reinforce the sand barriers. The wind was quiet, and only the sound of metal scraping sand echoed. "Dr. Amelia," Youssef called, holding something small and metallic. "I think I've found..." His sentence ended in a scream. The sand beneath him collapsed into a hidden shaft. "Youssef!" Amelia ran toward the hole. Jacob and Omar followed, shining flashlights down into the darkness. Youssef lay at the bottom, coughing and terrified, but something moved beside him. Bandages. Here is Act 2, dark, tense, cinematic, and perfect for your YouTube horror narration, approx 1,000 plus words. Nudge the Mummy, Act 2, the curse begins. The morning sun rose weakly over the dunes, but its warmth couldn't reach the camp. The air felt colder than the night before. Too cold for the desert. Too still, too silent. Only a handful of workers remained. Most had fled during the night, leaving behind tools, clothes, and even personal belongings. As if staying a second longer near the tomb would steal their lives. Dr. Amelia Ward stood beside the stone door, staring at the place where the decayed hand had emerged. She wasn't afraid of ancient curses, but she was terrified of things she couldn't explain. Jacob Hale adjusted his camera nervously, filming everything even though his hands trembled. I reviewed the footage, he said. Every frame of the mummy's hand is corrupted, glitched. It's like... The camera refused to capture it. Dr. Omar Khalid was pale. Good. The less evidence people have, the better. If anyone sees what we saw, they will try to open that tomb again, and that must never happen. Amelia glanced at the desert horizon. We seal the entrance today, permanently. But sealing the tomb wouldn't be easy, because something inside had already awakened. A worker goes missing. Around noon, one of the remaining workers, Youssef, was digging near the base of the stone door to reinforce the sand barriers. The wind was quiet, and only the sound of metal scraping sand echoed. "Dr. Amelia," Youssef called, holding something small and metallic. "I think I've found..." His sentence ended in a scream. The sand beneath him collapsed into a hidden shaft. "Youssef!" Amelia ran toward the hole. Jacob and Omar followed, shining flashlights down into the darkness. Youssef lay at the bottom, coughing and terrified, but something moved beside him. Bandages. The morning sun rose weakly over the dunes, but its warmth couldn't reach the camp. The air felt colder than the night before. Too cold for the desert, too still, too silent. Only a handful of workers remained. Most had fled during the night, leaving behind tools, clothes, and even personal belongings, as if staying a second longer near the tomb would steal their lives. Dr. Amelia Ward stood beside the stone door, staring at the place where the decayed hand had emerged. She wasn't afraid of ancient curses, but she was terrified of things she couldn't explain. Jacob Hale adjusted his camera nervously, filming everything even though his hands trembled. I reviewed the footage, he said. Every frame of the mummy's hand is corrupted, glitched. It's like... The camera refused to capture it. Dr. Omar Khalid was pale. Good. The less evidence people have, the better. If anyone sees what we saw, they will try to open that tomb again. And that must never happen. Amelia glanced at the desert horizon. We sealed the entrance today, permanently. But sealing the tomb wouldn't be easy, because something inside had already awakened. A worker goes missing. Around noon, one of the remaining workers, Yusef, was digging near the base of the stone door to reinforce the sand barriers. The wind was quiet, and only the sound of metal scraping sand echoed. "Dr. Amelia," Yusef called, holding something small and metallic. "I think I've found." His sentence ended in a scream. The sand beneath him collapsed into a hidden shaft. "Yusef!" Amelia ran toward the hole. Jacob and Omar followed, shining flashlights down into the darkness. Yusef lay at the bottom, coughing and terrified. But something moved beside him. Bandages. Long, thin, ancient bandages. They slithered like snakes, wrapping around his leg. Yusef screamed again, "Help me! Pull me up!" Jacob dropped to his knees. "Grab my hand! Climb!" But the bandages tightened, dragging Yusef across the sand floor. "No! No! Help me!" His voice faded as the bandages pulled him into a dark passageway. A final scream, then silence. Jacob stumbled back, shaking violently. It took him like he was nothing. Amelia's voice cracked. Neferhotep is rebuilding himself, feeding on the living. They all stepped away from the hole. The wind picked up again, soft at first, then strangely cold. Whispers circled the camp, not in English, not in Arabic, in a language older than humanity. Nightfall. Jacob couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Yosef disappearing into the dark, felt the cold breath of the mummy whispering from the tomb door, heard the pounding deep underground. Amelia sat in her tent, studying the ancient inscriptions again. She traced the warning with a trembling finger. "The unbound mummy feeds to rise." Omar entered her tent quietly. "We cannot stay another night. That thing is getting stronger." "We can't leave," Amelia insisted. "If we abandon this site, someone else will come. Someone who doesn't know what we saw." Omar opened his mouth to argue, but froze. A shadow moved behind the tent wall. Not a normal shadow. It was tall, thin, and wrapped in writhing bandages. Amelia froze. "Jacob," Omar whispered. "No, not Jacob." The shadow bent unnaturally, joints cracking, limbs stretching, and a rasping breath echoed through the fabric. Amelia's lantern flickered violently. The temperature dropped again. Then the tent wall tore open. The mummy stood in the opening, bandages swaying like living things. Its hollow eyes glowed faintly, reflecting an ancient hunger. Amelia stumbled back, knocking over the lantern. The mummy stepped forward, its feet not touching the ground. Omar grabbed Amelia's hand. "Run!" They sprinted out the back of the tent. The mummy's claws slashed the air a second later, slicing clean through the fabric. Jacob emerged from another tent, hearing the commotion. "What's happening?" "It's here!" Amelia screamed. "The mummy is here!" The desert fog rolled in out of nowhere, swallowing the camp. The fog glowed sickly pale, full of swirling shapes. Jacob stumbled. "Are those shadows?" Omar whispered. "No, those are the dead." Figures moved through the fog. Workers who had died in past expeditions, locals lost in sandstorms, even warriors from centuries ago. All reanimated, all controlled by Neferhotep. The undead marched toward the camp. Jacob lifted a shovel. "Back! Get back!" But the undead didn't stop. One grabbed his arm with shocking strength. Amelia slammed a crate into the creature's skull, shattering it, but another grabbed her leg. More surged forward. The mummy stood at the center of the fog, its bandages stretching outward like tentacles, puppeteering the dead. Omar shouted over the chaos, "We have to retreat to the trucks." They ran, pushing through undead bodies, dodging clawed hands, stumbling over sand and scattered tools. They reached the vehicles. Jacob jumped inside one and turned the key. Nothing. Amelia tried another truck. Dead battery. Another. Fuel line cut. Jacob screamed, "It sabotaged them. It doesn't want us to leave." The mummy drifted closer through the fog, its black eyes fixed on Amelia. It whispered one word that echoed inside their minds. "Mine." The undead swarmed again. Jacob grabbed Amelia and pulled her behind a boulder. "We need to move. We need shelter, anywhere away from the tomb." Omar pointed to the north. "There are old Bedouin ruins a few miles away. We can hide there." Amelia looked back at the mummy. It stretched its arms wide, and the fog pulsed like a living heartbeat. "Let's go," she whispered. They ran into the desert darkness, chased by moaning undead, swirling fog, and the distant growl of a mummy that should have never awakened. Behind them, the tomb door cracked open again. The night in the desert had never been so silent. The wind had died completely, the sand lay still, and even the stars seemed to dim as if watching something dreadful unfold. Mark, Sarah, and Omar stood frozen at the entrance of the sun chamber, staring at the towering figure emerging from the shadows, the mummy of Pharaoh Aruk-Ra. His bandages fluttered like dead leaves, and his hollow eyes burned with an ancient cursed fire. Around him the air shimmered with the power of centuries-old magic. "Run," Sarah whispered, but the mummy lifted his staff and pointed it toward them. The stone doors slammed shut, trapping them inside. The final trial begins. The walls rumbled, and ancient hieroglyphs began to glow with crimson light. Omar's voice trembled. "He's awakening the trials of the afterlife. We must survive all three, or we die here." Stone slabs shifted, revealing the first trial, the judgment of truth. A golden scale appeared, floating in the air. On the left pan was a feather. A ghostly voice echoed, "Your heart will be weighed. Speak a lie and be consumed." The light focused on Mark. "Tell the truth," Omar warned. "The gods punish lies with death." Mark swallowed. I wanted fame more than knowledge. I took this expedition not to learn, but to become famous." The scale remained stable. Now it turned to Sarah. She panicked. "I never believed in curses, but I used the project money for my personal research." The scale wavered, but then steadied. Omar stepped forward. I opened the tomb even after knowing the legends were real. I thought I could control it." The scale glowed brightly, then vanished. They had passed. But the chamber trembled again, revealing the second trial, the sands of the damned. A sandstorm exploded from the walls, forming ghostly shapes, tormented souls swirling like a tornado. "We must reach the other side," Sarah shouted. The three fought through the storm, sand slicing their skin like knives. Ghostly hands tried pulling them under. Mark tripped, sinking, but Omar dragged him up. Sarah shielded her face and charged ahead. At last, they collapsed against the far wall as the storm disappeared. The mummy stepped forward, raising his staff again. The floor split open, revealing the third and final trial, the guardian of the gate. A monstrous, jackal-headed creature, Anubite sentinel, climbed up, roaring. Its eyes glowed with the same fire as the mummy's. Sarah whispered, "We can't fight that." But Omar stared at the inscriptions around the room. "We aren't supposed to fight it. We're supposed to prove worth." He pulled out the scarab amulet they found in Act 2. The creature approached, claws ready to strike. Omar raised the amulet. The jackal paused, sniffed, then knelt. The trials vanished. A massive stone gateway opened, revealing an altar holding a glowing golden tablet. The truth of the curse. The mummy spoke for the first time, his voice echoing like thunder in a tomb. "You opened my prison. You awakened my torment." Omar stepped forward. "We didn't come to steal your power. We came to understand your story." The mummy's glowing eyes dimmed slightly. Sarah studied the tablet. "This tablet, it's not a seal. It's a confession." The carvings revealed the truth. Pharaoh Aruk-Ra had been betrayed by his own priests who feared his power. They cursed him, trapping his soul between life and death. The curse wasn't his creation. It was his punishment. Mark whispered, "He wasn't a tyrant. He was a prisoner." The mummy nodded slowly. "Free me," he said, "and you will leave alive." Breaking the curse. Sarah placed the tablet on the altar. Omar read the inscription aloud. Mark used the scarab amulet to unlock the final seal. Light erupted through the chamber. The mummy's bandages began to turn to dust. His body glowed. For a moment he looked human again. A tall, proud pharaoh standing before them, grateful yet sorrowful. "Thank you," he said softly. "Leave this place and tell the world my true story." With a final breath, centuries overdue, the pharaoh dissolved into golden sand. The curse was lifted. The escape. The temple began to collapse. "Run!" Mark shouted. They raced through the corridors, dodging falling stones. The statues crumbled, the walls cracked, and the air filled with dust. Omar guided them, using memory alone. Sarah pushed Mark after he stumbled. They burst through the entrance just as the entire structure collapsed into the desert in a thunderous explosion of sand and stone. Silence returned to the desert. The curse was gone. One final surprise. As the sun rose, the three survivors walked toward their jeep. Mark sighed. "We survived a pharaoh's curse. No one will believe us." Sarah smirked. Oh, they will. We have the tablet. Omar opened his bag. His face turned pale. The tablet, it's gone. Inside the bag was nothing but a small pile of gold sand. The Pharaoh had taken his story with him, but the scarab amulet was still there, warm to the touch. Omar whispered, some stories are meant for the desert. Behind them, the wind lifted gently, forming a swirl of golden dust, like a final wave goodbye.